Hello and welcome to Box, the football talk show brought to you by Sportology TV with myself, Ali Drew. On last week's episode, I was joined by Jamie Preston from Leicester Fan TV and Leeds United YouTuber KG. So if you haven't already, make sure you check those episodes out because they are some good ones. But on this week's episode, the first guest joining me is host and creator of The Chronicles of a Gooner, and you've guessed it, an Arsenal fan. I am delighted to be joined by Harry Symeou. Harry, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Delighted to be on.
Great to have you on. How are you? How are things at the moment with your work and everything that's going on?
Yeah, very good. I can't complain. I know sort of the pandemic's been quite difficult for a lot of people. I've been lucky that work has continued and stuff. It is getting a little bit sort of same old, being stuck in the house and sort of working from home, which, you know, but that's minor and it's all going well. I can't complain, to be honest. I'm one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, because obviously the last year with people not being able to go to the crowds, to stadiums and stuff, I guess your work's been completely different, or are you often at the games?
I've been lucky enough to get to some of them, not as many as I would have been at had the pandemic not hit, but it has changed things. You know, sometimes just getting out of the sort of office and breaking that routine a bit by going to a game is needed, and you need that kind of to be on the move a little bit. And it's been a little bit static over the last year or so. But as I say, you know, there are people in much worse situations who unfortunately their work has stopped completely. So I am grateful. I'm not complaining about it, but yeah, I can't wait to get back into the grounds.
And just talk to me about how you've got into it all in the first place. You know, presumably you've been a lifelong Arsenal fan, and your work is to do with Arsenal. It must be like a dream job. So just talk to me about how you got into it.
Yeah, so I was in a completely different industry previously. I was in banking, which is something I just fell into sort of as a 17, 18-year-old when I came out of school. And it, you know, I was earning money and I just got on with it. But a few years ago, I got really big into kind of podcasting, and I created a podcast, and I've been lucky enough to appear on lots of radio shows and TV channels and stuff. And I thought, do you know what? Maybe I should give this a go sort of full time. It's what I want to do. So I took a bit of a risk and jumped out of a stable career into an unstable career, which was a little bit daunting at first. But if you work hard and you genuinely love what you do, then you will get somewhere. And you know, I'm not where I want to be just yet, and I, you know, I know it's going to be a hard graft to get there, but I'm delighted that I've been able to turn it into my career. And as you say, you know, following Arsenal, it is something I would have been doing anyway. So to turn it into a job you're right, it's a dream come true.
That's great. Well, we do need to talk about Arsenal. So we'll start off talking about, obviously, this weekend's game against Fulham. They drew. Arsenal are ninth in the table. So just talk to me about this weekend's game, you know, the fact that it was a draw, and just in general, how you found this season for Arsenal.
It's been a tough season as an Arsenal fan. It really has been. And you know, people used to talk a lot about sort of the fall at the back end of Arsene Wenger's days, but we were never in a position like the one we're in now. We're a mid-table side. Inconsistency has been the biggest issue for me. I think we're going through a transition with regards to the playing staff. We've got a new manager in who, you know, is trying to change the culture, but it's going to take time. You've also got to factor in the pandemic, which has meant that Arsenal financially haven't been in a position to make those changes quicker. And it's been a painful process. You know, it's something that we've all struggled with this season. The Europa League at the moment offers a little bit of respite from that because it's a competition we're doing very well in. But, you know, a lot of people sort of are up in arms every time Arsenal drop points. And I'm talking about Arsenal fans here. You know, the reaction seems to be seismic every time we don't win a football match. But the reality is performances like the one against Fulham yesterday have never been more than just around the corner. Because, you know, if you're realistic about where this team are at and their current level, then I don't think you should be overly surprised. And I think you've got to try and look at the bigger picture, as hard as that is, when you love the club.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Europa League there. Arsenal are through to the semi-finals. How big is that for Arsenal? You know, it's in a season where, as you say, inconsistent, they're sort of mid-table in the Premier League. How important is it that they've got through to this Europa League semi-finals?
Yeah, it's huge because it relieves the pressure on Mikel Arteta, because there's a lot of pressure on him. You know, I know the club are fully invested in him and they've backed him quite heavily, but from a fan's perspective, I'd say it's a 50-50 split at the moment. There are a lot of fans who are wondering if we made the right decision appointing somebody so inexperienced into such a big role. But winning the Europa League would be his second trophy in 2 seasons. And it would get us back into the Champions League, which would have been the objective at the start of the campaign. Obviously, this announcement of the European Super League throws a bit of a spanner in the works and creates some uncertainty around, what's going to happen. We heard late last night from some journalists that the Europa League and Champions League have been temporarily suspended, which would be terrible news for us. But I don't know if that's going to be the case. As I say, it's a really fluid situation and we're going to have to wait and see. But from our perspective, to be alive in Europe and to have something other than the Premier League to focus on has been massive.
Well, we will talk about that Super League in a minute. But what do you personally make of Arteta? Do you like him? Do you think he's the right person for Arsenal?
Yeah, I do like him. I think I'm willing to give him time because I like his ideas and I like the way he comes across and the way he communicates. And he's somebody that you can get on board with. Now, often in life, you'll come across people who talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And it remains to be seen whether Mikel's going to be one of those or not, but he needs more time to prove himself either way. So I like him. I like what he stands for. I like the principles that he's brought into the club. For years and years, as a fan base, we'd been moaning about the culture in and around the dressing room, about people getting a free ride, people staying in the team when they haven't been performing, etc., etc. So to now dig out somebody who's quite evidently trying to change that, I think is a bit hypocritical. And that's why I'm willing to give him more time. But my initial feelings on him are that he can go on to become a really, really good coach and coach at the highest level. I do wonder sometimes if this was the right move for him as well as the football club, because so much needed putting right. Maybe a more experienced head would have been able to get results quicker. But I guess it's all hindsight and you never really know.
It must be the hardest job being a football manager at the moment. Like, I wouldn't want to do it, that's for sure. It's almost as if they do things right, that's fine. But as soon as one thing goes wrong, it's all on them, all their fault, and they're the first to go.
Absolutely, yeah. It's ultimately you're responsible for the results of the football club, aren't you? And all the sort of nuances that go with that, all of the sort of other factors outside of your control are often overlooked, and you are based solely on that. So it is a difficult job. And I think, in some ways, not having fans in the stadium has been a negative, obviously, but it's been a positive, I think, as well for some of these managers, because I can tell you one thing, the Emirates Stadium, full house, would not have accepted some of the performances we've seen from Arsenal at home this season, and they'd have made their feelings clear. So in that sense, I think he's had a bit of a touch. But on the other side, you're thinking, well, sometimes you need that support to spur the team on. But I could list the factors all day. There's so many that have impacted this job this season, and it's why I'm reserving judgment still.
Well, the next game is against Everton, I think, who are 8th in the table. So it's an important game. They are, one place ahead. How do you see that going? And also, do you see that at this stage in the season, we are quite a way through the Premier League season, do you see Arsenal sort of moving up the table at all, or do you think they're going to just sort of stay around this position mid-table?
I think had we beaten Fulham at the weekend, the game against Everton would have become huge, because we'd have had an opportunity to really close the gap on them and put pressure on them, and then potentially close in on those above them as well. The fact that we dropped 2 points at Fulham makes me feel like Mikel Arteta might look at it now and go, we had both routes open to us. I think dropping those 2 points against Fulham maybe makes the Premier League route back into Europe a little bit out of our reach. And so it's time to focus fully on the Europa League. I think Unai Emery, when he was Arsenal boss, suffered from not knowing which way to go. He got to the end of the season. He was in the mix via the Europa League and via the Premier League. And he ended up rotating and trying to prioritise both. And he made a mess of it. And we ended up with nothing. So I think Mikel Arteta will look at that and say, we dropped a couple of points against Fulham. That's unforgivable in your pursuit of European football. So maybe now it's just time to focus on the Europa League. Plus, we picked up injuries at the weekend, which is bad news. And he'll probably be looking at that. And that might be putting him off as well, sort of overexerting themselves in the Premier League.
Yeah, as you say, there's injuries. This season's players have just been a crazy amount of injuries, I think, this season for every team. And also, is Aubameyang still out because he had malaria? I saw that. Is he still suffering?
Yeah, so he went on international duty a few weeks ago, and he reported back, and a few days afterwards he started not feeling 100%. It's why he was left out of the team on a couple of occasions. Obviously, there was lots of speculation about him falling out with Mikel Arteta. That's proven not to be true, though. He wasn't at 100%. And after a load of tests, they came to the conclusion that he picked up malaria. So he says he's doing fine, according to Mikel Arteta, and he says that he's planning to return this coming weekend. Arsenal play on Friday night against Everton. But, you know, something like that probably takes quite a bit out of you physically, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's out for a few more days beyond that. But I guess the positive, and there's obviously no positive of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang picking up malaria, but I guess the positive is that all the kind of stories about him and Arteta falling out, you know, our highest paid player, our biggest star, our talisman, can kind of be put to bed. And it goes to show that actually a lot of the speculation on whatever subject is not always warranted. We just don't know the full story. So fingers crossed he can return as soon as possible, particularly with Lacazette picking up an injury now. And he can guide us to Europa League glory.
Which player do you think this season has sort of stood out for you and really stepped up and performed, you know, from the Arsenal team? It has been a difficult season and everyone's sort of had their ups and downs, but who's sort of impressed you?
I think we've got to kind of like avoid the obvious ones. Like obviously Bukayo Saka has been brilliant. He's a young player who's stepped up to the plate and done really, really well. He's played pretty much every week. You know, you look at Emil Smith-Rowe, he's come in since Christmas and he's done brilliantly as well. But for me, the one who I've been most impressed with over the last 5-6 months has got to be Granit Xhaka. And I know a lot of Arsenal fans don't like him, and they've never forgiven him for the whole incident with the captaincy and when he stormed off the pitch. But he's got his head down after looking as though he was headed for the exit. He's done a really important job in midfield. You can see when we're without him that we're half the team. Because of the tactical stability and positioning and all of that discipline that he brings there. And I just really like his attitude. I like the fact that he's come back from a really difficult sort of moment in his career and come back stronger and looks a better player. The fact that he plays every week when fit, and the fact that he's now been trusted to go in and cover at left back, tells you all you need to know about Mikel's feelings towards him. And contrary to what the fans say or what the fans think, this is a player who's been backed now by every manager at Arsenal. Arsene Wenger was big on him. Unai Emery was big on him. Freddie Ljungberg, when he took over for that short period, was big on him. And now Mikel Arteta is too. So he's obviously got a huge impact behind the scenes and is a really loved player within the camp. Unfortunately, the public perception is not always as good, though.
But we do need to talk about this European Super League business that's sort of come out a lot over the weekend. It's all a bit confusing. No one really knows what's happening. You know, they're saying that the top 6 teams or the top 6 clubs have said they're going, that's it. But then the players, apparently UEFA said the players are going to be banned from the Premier League, from world football. It's all a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it is. What I think needs to be stressed, and I think a lot of people are overlooking, is that the plans for the European Super League were not to replace the Premier League. They were to replace the Champions League. The intention of these clubs is to remain in their domestic leagues and compete for those every single season. But now UEFA and the Premier League and La Liga and Serie A have taken a hard stance, and they're saying, well, if you're going to join the Super League, then you're not going to be part of our domestic competitions. But I think there's a lot to still unfold here. Can the Premier League afford to lose those big 6 clubs? The appeal of their product, and this is no disrespect to the smaller clubs, but the appeal of the product reduces significantly. Can they go and get millions and billions of pounds in TV rights for a league that doesn't contain any of those clubs? I don't think they can. And I think the same can be said for La Liga and for Serie A. And UEFA's Champions League all of a sudden is nowhere near as valuable without those big name clubs. So I think that actually, whilst they're kind of barking back, UEFA, the Premier League, etc., I don't think they can allow those teams to leave their competition. So I think there will be some form of compromise struck. The big sort of disappointment for me about the Super League is that there are 15 clubs that can never be relegated from it. And from an Arsenal perspective, if you tell our owners that they can guarantee that huge revenue that is even bigger than what the Champions League currently offers every single season, regardless of their performance, then of course they're going to jump at it. And the pandemic has seen a lot of clubs, not just here in the UK, but in Europe, struggle. And the appeal of the finances that are on the table is just too big. I don't like it. I don't think it's good for football. I think it devalues the domestic competitions greatly. And the whole competitiveness of being able to qualify for the top European competition on merit disappears. So I'm not for it. But from a business perspective, I can understand why they've all gone for it. They don't want UEFA to be pocketing mega money anymore off of their backs. They've realized that they can do this by themselves and create a competition from which they benefit solely. And they're cutting out the middleman. So it was always going to happen. I just hope that the repercussions of it are not that our domestic game completely dies, because domestic football is at the heart of the game, isn't it? And it would be a real shame.
Yeah, I mean, something will have to give, because the Premier League will not survive without the main, the big teams in it. Money wise, people watching it wise, it just won't happen. And the football world is in uproar about it. People are coming out left, right, and centre saying they're not going to support it. But it is, I mean, presumably it is happening. It's just the sort of rules around it. Are they going to be able to still be in the Premier League? That's the sort of thing that's up for debate.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing that's up for debate. Look, these clubs would not have resigned from the clubs association the way they've done this morning. They wouldn't have made official announcements. None of that would have happened if this wasn't very far down the line. So I think the Super League is going to happen. It's just now over to UEFA and the Premier League. And I think actually the Super League clubs are calling their bluff. Premier League will say, oh, you can't compete in our Premier League. And the Super League clubs are kind of saying, well, we are your Premier League. So go on then. Let's see how long you last without us. Because it's, to take away those clubs from the competition, I think you lose 75% of the global audience. And that's no disrespect to any of the other teams. And I'm not just saying it because I'm an Arsenal fan and my team are one of those teams. But the size of the fan bases of these clubs, in particular, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester United, I think is massive. And to lose their global appeal would be very damaging to the Premier League. And I think they'll back down eventually.
Do you think that the Super League will, I don't know how they could change the format so that there is, if there's a team in there that really start performing terribly, they're even if they are still playing in the Premier League, they're right down the bottom of the table, but yet they're still in the Super League. Do you think they could be a thing where if you're performing that badly elsewhere, then you're out and another team could potentially go into it, just to make it almost more open and fair to the other teams? Maybe more people be on board.
That's how it should work. That's how it should work in theory. But equally, if you're going to entice these big clubs to walk away from everything they've got now, you have to give them something. And that something is a guarantee of that revenue. So we know that there'll be 15 spaces in the Super League, 12 of which have been officially filled, and there's still 3 up for grabs. Those clubs will not be relegated. They will be in the competition every year. And the way the Super League have tried to sweeten it is by saying we'll give 5 positions to teams that earn the right to qualify. But Arsenal, Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, Tottenham, they will never be relegated from it. They'll be in it every single year. So that's where I've got an issue with the competitiveness. I'm all for skipping UEFA, because UEFA don't do much good for the game. I don't think they've caused loads of problems in years gone by. I've got no issue with the clubs almost bypassing them to make their own product. But it's the impact it has now. Arsenal, if they still play in the Premier League, could finish 10th. And it wouldn't matter. Where's the incentive to go and finish 2nd, 3rd or 4th? There isn't one. Because if you're not going to win the Premier League and get the trophy, there's nothing at the end of it for you, because your revenue is still there. That's my issue with it.
Yeah, it's true. It's going to be interesting to see how it develops. But another developing story, which we do need to talk about, that you have just told me I didn't even know, is at Tottenham Hotspur. Do you want to tell us?
Yeah, so reports are emerging this morning that Tottenham Hotspur have sacked Jose Mourinho. They've not had a great season, Tottenham, domestically. Obviously, they're in the Carabao Cup final, and that was being looked at as potentially his saving grace. So to make this decision a week before the Carabao Cup final feels really strange. But I guess, and I don't know this, but, I guess you could speculate and say perhaps he was opposed to the Super League. And perhaps that's why Tottenham have decided to pull the trigger on him. But I'm sure we're going to get more details and more information on that in the sort of coming hours and days. But it is big news, because you know, he's a controversial character. Wherever he goes, he divides opinion. I don't think he's done a very good job at Spurs, if I'm honest. I've sort of made the case that Mourinho's best years have been behind him for quite some time now. And, you know, it happens to all great managers. You know, I can talk about Arsene Wenger and how great he was and how it turned out. So sometimes you're not quite up to date anymore. You're not, I don't want to say relevant because that's a little bit disrespectful, but you're not operating at the level required as anymore. And that was certainly the case with Mourinho. I know from speaking to a lot of Spurs fans, obviously living in North London, they're amongst me. I can't get away from them. But they've been unhappy with Mourinho for a while now and the style of football that he's brought to the club. So I don't think it will come as a huge surprise to them that he's not going to be their manager next season. But I think the timing of it is a little bit strange. And I suspect there's probably more to it than we know.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very controversial figure in football. He always has been. He backs himself as a certain way of doing things, and that's it. Do you think that, you know, you say maybe he's just not as relevant or not up to date with stuff? Do you think that he should stop maybe with the management? We saw him in between jobs. He was doing a bit of punditry, and actually very good. I very entertaining, very good. He's got the personality. Do you think that's the route maybe he should go down?
Yeah, I do, because, you know, somebody like Mourinho has got incredible experience in the game at the highest level, and he offers a great level of insight. But as you said, he's also got the character to pull it off. And when you look at Jose Mourinho in an environment where he's not under pressure, he seems like such a nice guy. You look at him and you think, I could go on a night out with this guy and I'd enjoy it. But then you see him when he's in a pressured situation and he becomes a really nasty character, I think. And he's always looking to deflect blame off of himself, off of his players, whether it be onto the referees or to some. There's always somebody else to blame for his kind of failures in recent years. So I think you're probably right. I think I would enjoy seeing Mourinho on my TV screen every weekend when I'm watching the football. I still think there are probably jobs in Europe outside of the Premier League that he could still do very well. And I'm a massive follower of Serie A, do a lot of work on Italian football. And I still think that he could be successful there because things are very different. The culture is very different. But in the Premier League now, I just think it's not right for him anymore. And I think he needs to move on. But you make a great point. I'd love to see him on TV. I think he'd be great.
He's a bit like Roy Keane, you know, just says what he thinks, quite funny, and there's no one really like them. I think it just makes great TV, and he just says what he's thinking as well. He doesn't care if people, you know, agree with it or not. But just quickly, I want to touch on the top four in the table. Man City obviously had a great season, sort of run away with the title now. Just talk to me about the sort of second, third, and fourth positions. Where do you see them going? Do you see them where they currently are?
I think United are pretty nailed on to finish second. I would be very surprised if that didn't happen. I think third and fourth are still up for grabs though. And I'm not being disrespectful to Leicester, but they do have a history. Every Brendan Rodgers side actually has a history of dropping off at the back end of a season. You know, so I wouldn't be surprised if Leicester were to fall away. And I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if Chelsea and Liverpool actually nipped in and took third and fourth, because I still think they're stronger sides. I know they've had difficult seasons, but then West Ham and Leicester, I think they could potentially nip in there. And I think those two positions are still up for grabs for me massively. First and second are done, in my opinion, but third and fourth, I think there's a lot to play for there. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Liverpool and Chelsea just steal a march on those two with a late run towards the end of the season.
Who would have thought that we would be talking about Liverpool just edging into the top four? You just wouldn't have thought it last year, would you?
No, I mean, they were incredible last year. Credit to Jurgen Klopp for getting them to that level. The issue I've always had with Jurgen Klopp, and maybe it's not even a problem with Jurgen Klopp, maybe it's an issue with the way the club is run, is that they were always just one or two injuries away from this because their squad was so small in terms of the players that Jurgen Klopp would pick from week to week. It was the continuation of his selection. The continuity of his selection was one of the reasons they were so successful. But on the other hand, it was always a weakness because if you lose a couple of centre backs beyond that, they had nothing. You know, if Firmino stops firing, who else can come in at centre forward? You know, Salah's had a good season, but Mane hasn't. And Jota, who they brought in to come in and replace, has had injury problems of his own and has not always been available. So it's all, they've always been just around the corner from this. And, I think if they were to sneak into the top 4 off the back of what's been a really unlucky as well as disappointing campaign for them, I think they'd have done well. But you're right, nobody envisaged this sort of 12 months ago, did they?
Nobody did. It's been a crazy season. Have you enjoyed it? Obviously, the fact that there's been no fans, no one's liked, but the fact that it's been, so entertaining. So teams have gone from mid-table to the top to back down, people, crazy amount of goals. It's just been an interesting season all round.
I've got to be honest, I've not enjoyed it. I've not enjoyed it. Not as much as I've enjoyed previous seasons. I guess a lot of that will be down to the fact that my team are languishing in mid-table. But outside of that, I found a lot of the games to be boring and quite drab and dull. And when the fans would be in the ground to give those teams a bit of a kick up the backside and sort of spur them on, it's just not happened. And a lot of games have sort of drowned out into kind of low scoring draws. I'm a commentator as well, and I must have done the best part of 25 Premier League games this season. And the majority of them, I've looked back and gone, I don't want to listen to this one back. Like there was nothing. I didn't enjoy it. So I can't wait for fans to get back in the stadium. And I think the fact we're playing so many games in such short spaces of time is also impacting the level because of the fatigue and the tiredness and the level of rotation needed. I think we've seen the level drop, if I'm honest, and it's not been great for me.
Yeah, I mean, the start of the season, there was a lot of goals and it definitely has dropped off the sort of longer on it's gone with injuries going through the roof. But before we finish, I do want to ask you a question that we ask all our guests. So who do you think out of all the players you've watched play live, who has been your favourite? And the best you just thought, wow. Incredible.
That's a tough question. Not so much nowadays, but because we're not in it. But when we were in the Champions League, I had the benefit of watching some great players at Arsenal and sort of abroad, etc. I think for me, I think there's a very strong argument that he's the best player of all time, and that's Lionel Messi. And although he's torn my team apart on numerous occasions, and I've had to watch it at the Emirates Stadium, I think for me, just watching him live was kind of half of the appeal of going to the game. And so I know it sounds like an obvious choice. And so I'll say that Thierry Henry comes close to that. I'll say that Dennis Bergkamp, Robert Pires, Patrick Vieira are all up there for me. But in terms of the standout, it's got to be Lionel Messi, just because, I always think back to when they came to the Emirates Stadium and completely played us off the park. And he came to the corner where I was to take a corner, and the whole stadium got up to applaud him. Like, that level of respect for what he does, it is the biggest signal that, for me, he's probably the greatest of all time and the greatest I've seen for sure.
Yeah, he is an all-time great. That's a good choice. Harry, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great talking to you, and good luck for the semi-finals for Arsenal and whatever's going to happen with the rest of the season, and hopefully get you back on the show again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Big fan of yours as well. So delighted to have been asked. So thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Great to be joined there by Harry Symeou. But guys, stay tuned because we have lots more coming up. We've got another guest joining us this week. And then we've got loads more planned for the channel. So please keep doing what you can to support us. Subscribe, share, leave some comments, whatever you can. We do really appreciate it. And we will see you next time.